5 now. In its first report for 6 years, the panel on climate change says it's virtually certain that pollution is at least partly responsible for rising temperatures. The Secretary-General of the United Nations, Ban Ki-moon, has said the report is central to plans for governments to finalise their agreement on climate change. Let's talk to Roger Helmer, UKIP MEP for the East Midlands, and also Lucy Kerr, who's from Derby Climate Change Coalition. Lucy, very good evening to you.
Good evening.
You'd have been listening very closely to the IPCC's report today. What did you make of it?
I think it's taking us another step down the same path that it was very clear last time. It is very, very clear this time that man has affected our climate. But I don't think it matters really how much you believe the science or not. We can see it happening around us. It's clear that our climate is changing. Anybody who's over the age of about 20 or 30 can remember their childhood and can remember that the weather is different now to what it was then. And I think that people... the scientists have got clearer and clearer in their analytical studies of what is happening. But you don't have to believe and understand all the technology to be prepared to go up in an aeroplane. You understand it works. And as individuals, we don't need to scrutinise that science. Other people have done it for us. It's very clear that they have come to conclusions, and it's a very authoritative report.
We'll come back to you very shortly, Lucy. Let's have a few words from Roger Helmer. Evening, Roger.
Well, good evening, Dean.
What do you make of the report, then?
Well, I think that Lucy would do well to scrutinise the science. I think the public out there are going to be fairly astonished that you have this official panel coming along and saying we are now more certain than ever that mankind is causing climate change, when in fact there hasn't been any climate change for the best part of 20 years. In fact, I congratulate Lucy for sticking to the Climate Concern Coalition, or whatever it's described as, when there isn't any climate change to worry about.
No change, Lucy. What do you make of it?
You can't look at climate over a couple of decades. You need to look at climate over hundreds of years. And because we have been recording climate over that period, and we can extrapolate backwards by looking at geological factors, at discussion and records and things that have changed over time, we know very clearly that it's not a fortnight or 2 years or 10 years or 20 years. We're talking here about the last 200 years compared to what happened in the 2,000 years before that, and going back another 20,000 years beyond that. Our climate is changing.
Well, can I come right back on that? Lucy, you ought to know that 20,000 years ago, we were in the middle of an ice age and there was half a mile of ice over Glasgow. I'm delighted you're prepared to look at it in a longer-term context, because if you are, you will know that 1,000 years ago, we had the medieval warm period when it was warmer than today. 2,000 years ago, we had the Roman optimum when it was warmer than today. And if you want to go back a bit further, 3,000 years, the Minoan optimum. And before that, we had the Holocene optima. So what we are seeing now is natural long-term climate change. It looks as though we're moving into a new natural 21st century optimum, which is an excellent thing and will be good for humankind. The point is that these are natural long-term changes which are well understood. Nothing unusual is happening, and therefore nothing requires a special explanation.
Let me bring Lucy back on that before we just move this argument on a bit.
I want to move it on because I think we need to consider what action we should be taking, because what concerns me is that we live in a technological and scientifically literate society. We have literally thousands of scientists across the globe who have done serious work and have looked at what is happening. And for some reason, there are just a very, very few people, such as yourself, who for some reason deny what the majority of scientists are saying.
Why do you deny what these scientists are saying, Roger?
Because I have worked with a great number of scientists, including some who have served on the IPCC panel and have the Nobel Prize lapel pin to prove it, and they disagree. My good friend Fred Singer, for example, Professor Fred Singer, University of Virginia, has said that the IPCC accepts his corrections to their punctuation and spelling, but won't accept their corrections to his science.
So there are scientists, Lucy, who disagree with what the IPCC has been saying?
There are very few of them. But
if you go on the blogosphere, you do see lots, don't you?
There are
eminent figures.
But can we move on and actually look at what is...
No, but let's come back to Roger's point, because he is making a point about a number of climate experts and scientists who do disagree with a number of IPCC report items.
Go back to the panel last time. I haven't checked the individual members of it this time, but the last report 6 years ago, we were told there were 2,500 scientists who all agreed. When we checked, we found that something like half of them were not scientists at all. They were actually environmental activists from Greenpeace and organisations like that.
Isn't that a problem, Lucy, that you've got activists rather than scientists getting involved in this?
In different fields.
This is where I feel that we actually need to be looking at the bigger issue.
You don't want to respond to the facts.
No, there is. I don't mind whether there is a 100% consensus or 95% consensus that climate is changing.
There is a debate that the consensus is breaking up.
In my view, it isn't, but from your perspective, it is. But the question is that the actions that people who consider the climate is changing would like us to take happen to be very similar, if not identical, actions to people who are concerned about things like the amount of money it costs to heat your house, the balance of trade and where we are getting our fossil fuels from and how much our energy is costing. The actions that we need to take for both causes are the same way. If we insulate our homes better, we pay less for our heating. And if we're paying less for our heating, we're actually using less fuel and we're making the climate change situation, in my perspective, better. So it doesn't matter whether or not you believe in climate change, the actions that people can take, and in my view, should be taking, are the same.
Roger, final word with you then.
No, this is entirely wrong. What we're doing is we're putting in wholly ineffective wind farms and solar panels, which have the effect of driving up prices for homes and for industry, but actually don't deliver. And meantime, in China, in India, in South America, they are building coal-fired power stations very rapidly. So the things we are doing are undermining our economy. The industry commissioner in the European Commission said 2 weeks ago we're facing an industrial massacre in Europe because of high energy prices forced by these absurd green policies, and yet they cannot deliver because all around the rest of the world people are building coal-fired power stations.
RogerHelmer, thank you very much indeed for joining us, and to Lucy Kerr as well. Two sides...